mushrooms. It seems like they're everywhere lately, in the grass, on the trees, on TV, on clothing. There's mushroom print, mushroom sculptures, mushroom burgers. Okay, those have been out for a while, but seriously, like, it feels like they're everywhere. The mushroom, folks, is having a moment. So, what's driving this latest mushroom craze? Today, we're speaking to the fungi curious among us and taking a deep dive into the magical, mystical, and admittedly delicious world of mushrooms. Welcome to Speaking of, the Unbothered Edition, with Casey Chapter. Yes, like the book.
Hello everyone, I'm Casey Chapter, and I am a lover of mushrooms, but not the magic kind.
And I'm Lynn Hatter, and I am fungi curious.
And today we are speaking of mushrooms.
So, what about mushrooms is exploding right now? No pun intended. But for real, like, something's happening. Like, mushrooms are definitely a thing.
No, absolutely. If you've walked through like a Target recently, you'll see the dish rags, the socks, the t-shirts, the dresses, the shoes. I feel like even the vitamin aisle is just dominated by mushrooms and mushroom supplements.
You know, that's so wild because when I was visiting my grandfather in Arkansas, he has been making all of these like ceramic mushrooms. And they've been selling like crazy. And like my grandfather lives in like this tiny little town called like Judsonia. And like his mushrooms, like people are on it.
That's honestly, I might hit you up about that. I might like to buy a ceramic mushroom from my garden.
They are for sale for the low price of.
So I've been wondering why this is such a seemingly recent thing. And I mean, I'm seeing them everywhere. I even have a mushroom foraging book that somebody gifted me recently. So I might look into that as well. I could just go on.
That's intense. You know, we have a local mushroom farm in Tallahassee, and they're selling all kind of different like edible mushrooms.
Yeah, I've actually bought them before at the farmer's market. They have so many different types that I'd never even heard of or seen before. And so I actually was able to sit down and speak with Josh Saul, who runs the farm and who started the farm like 10 years ago.
Vegetarianism and veganism, I think, is another big thing that's culturally like gotten like way more mainstream, and a lot of vegans and vegetarians are really looking for things that they can satisfy the cravings or like for like the texture of meat.
And I will say I do this. I love to replace meat with mushrooms in my dishes when I cook at home because I don't eat meat. And I really like the flavor and the texture that mushrooms provide. So it's like a really cool way of substituting other than just relying on tofu or vegan proteins.
You know, I feel like the only mushrooms I'm really familiar with are like portobello, simply because I like them in like a sandwich, and like the traditional white mushrooms that I would like cut up in for a salad. But like beyond portobello and like the regular mushrooms, I admit I don't know much else.
What's so interesting is we talked about that. He said something so crazy, which was that portobellos and white mushrooms, the button kinds that you see in the store, those are the only kind that they sell in the store because they have the longest shelf life. Because a lot of other mushrooms, like oyster mushrooms, are really delicate and they'll fall apart within like a few weeks, whereas portobellos and white mushrooms, they grow and they're good for like a month. But he also said that the only difference between the brown portobello mushrooms and the white ones is that the white ones are grown in the dark and portobellos are grown in the sunlight. So they're different colors. So it looks like there's variety, but they're the same type of mushroom actually.
Wait a minute. So I've been paying a premium to eat the same exact mushroom? I feel like I've gotten had.
I know. I was shocked too. And so, yeah, that's why I've been buying the local ones, because not only are they different, but they also just are cool.
That is wild. Okay, so here's a question. Wild mushrooms, right? We've all heard the whole like, yeah, you might not want to eat that one that's growing on that tree. I have a question for you. What kind of mushrooms would you eat if you were just foraging?
Okay, well, we definitely all know, I think, in the Tallahassee area, everyone's kind of familiar with the chanterelles because they grow everywhere. And
are those the ones that grow in hearts in my front yard?
If they're orange, then yes.
Okay.
And Josh actually had another really interesting thing to say about foraging and chanterelles specifically.
Chanterelle mushrooms are like very aromatic, kind of almost like apricot smelling orange mushroom, and they grow symbiotically with the root systems of oak trees. And obviously Tallahassee's known for its oak trees. So yeah, we have a really good population of chanterelle mushrooms. So yeah, that was kind of my in on mushrooms. I kind of fell in love with foraging chanterelles and others too. Once I got into that as a hobby, I got a field guide and stuff, and I started really getting interested in being able to identify different kinds.
I feel like I'm now going to start looking differently at oak trees and the mushrooms that are all around me in my neighborhood, for sure.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Even just today, I was walking my dog and there was this beautiful red-capped, I don't even know what it was, but I just saw red growing up from the grass, and it looks like one of those like cartoony mushrooms that you see.
I was
you
going
know?
to say the Super Mario mushroom,
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah, it looked just like that. I know there's a name for them. I just don't remember it right now. But those are so pretty. See, it's an aesthetic thing, I think, for me with the mushrooms. That's probably why people are so drawn to them right now, or at least part of the reason.
It's a whole vibe. I told you at the beginning, I'm fungi curious.
So, thinking about along the lines of aesthetics, and how visually appealing mushrooms are, I think what's really interesting too is that they've been used in media a lot, not just on like products in the store, but like, have you seen The Last of Us?
I missed that memo.
Okay.
In my defense, there's so much good stuff out there that I'm slowly making my way around to it.
Okay, well, I will just say about The Last of
No
Us
spoilers.
really briefly, no spoilers, but I didn't know. I also missed the memo until very recently, and when I found out, I was like, wait. Like, I knew The Last of Us was about zombies, okay, whatever. It's like another zombie thing, whatever. The zombies are mushroom-based zombies. Nobody told me that. They have mycelium networks. These things look so cool
Like
in the
Star
video
Trek,
game.
like Star Trek Discovery, when they're cruising on the mycelial network.
Okay, yes, exactly.
Okay, I went full nerd. My bad.
No, listen, like exactly though. The mycelium connects all of them. It's really interesting, and visually, it's so cool how they make the zombies look like mushrooms are just growing out of their faces and stuff. But like speaking of this, something really interesting about like certain types of mushrooms that Josh talked about was like the different structures, because like we're used to traditionally seeing like a stem, a cap, gills, like the little what you think of when you hear the word mushroom,
Yeah.
that shape. But there are so many other types of mushrooms that grow in a weird different way that it's like it almost doesn't even look like it is a fungus. Yeah, you should look up lion's mane mushrooms. Have you ever seen one?
I have not.
Okay, they look like a little furry creature that you could just pet. It's like a guinea pig, really. So they are a type, and Josh said something about this. They're called hericium mushrooms, and they don't have the cap with gills and a stem, whatever. They have tiny, like, tendrils. And he said, and I quote,
Hericium, they call them tooth fungus because they don't have like a cap with gills. They just have a bunch of tiny little, I guess they're like little tendrils, and the spores come out of the tip. They're like little, it's like thousands of little spore guns.
$1 million question. Can I eat them?
yes, you can
Oh
eat
my
lion's mane. In fact, they taste like chicken. I know. Okay, listen, I was skeptical too. But listen, I've cooked it myself. You can sear it off, and I swear it's the same texture as chicken. But also, I've seen recipes where people will tear it, like shred a lion's mane mushroom and make a crab cake out of it. And it tastes really lemony and stuff, so it really does mimic the flavor of like a seafood dish.
I'm
I
so
know.
glad this is a podcast and no one can see my face right now.
Yeah. So kind of crazy. Mushrooms are so awesome and so diverse, and I think people don't even like know or understand how many different types there are.
I'm here for it. Well, I guess maybe that'll do it. So I'll go ahead and sign off. I'm Lynn Hatter.
And I'm Casey Chapter. Be sure to check out my full conversation with Josh Saul in the Speaking of Unbothered edition, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for letting me know more about mushrooms.
Welcome to Speaking of. I'm Casey Chapter, your producer and host, and I'm here with Josh Saul of Play of Sunlight Mushrooms. Hello, Josh.
Hi.
So, first off, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, I'm from Jacksonville Beach. I moved to Tallahassee in 2008, and yeah, and I grow mushrooms now. I've been doing that for like a decade.
And what got you started with that?
Not growing psychedelic mushrooms. That's what most people assume. But it was actually foraging chanterelle mushrooms. So yeah, that was kind of my in on mushrooms. I kind of fell in love with foraging chanterelles and others too. Once I got into that as a hobby, I got a field guide and stuff, and I started really getting interested in being able to identify different kinds. I started at like the very, very, very beginning, and it was a hobby for, the first year or two. I knew I wanted to do it for a career. I was like, this is a cool way to make money. Like, and I grew up in a restaurant too that my parents ran. So like, I really like the idea of like being able to work with restaurants, but not have to work in a restaurant or run one. So yeah, I mean, it took a long time. It took a really long time to get to where we are now. Because when you start growing mushrooms, like ideally, you start really, really small. I was only focused on growing mushrooms, and I was doing all this stuff at the beginning. So I would like clone mushrooms from the wild and then get them on petri dishes and then do all the transferring to like grain spawn and then into substrate and then grow them out. And then I'd have 5 pounds in a week, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 50 pounds, 100 pounds. And every time you like double the amount that you're trying to produce in a week, say you go from like 20 to 40, 40 to 80, 80 to 160, and like it could cost you $1,000, $10,000, $50,000 to get to the next one because of the equipment that you have to still be able to get that work done in 1 week, because the way our business model works, I mean, we have deliveries the same day every week. So we have like hundreds and hundreds of pounds that are going out on each route. And, the chefs are counting on that. It's on their menus and things like that. So it has to be super, super consistent.
Very cool. So what types of mushrooms do you grow,
Mhm.
and why do you grow the types that you do?
Okay, so we're always changing a little bit, like what we grow. We like to try different kinds, but we definitely have staples. So I don't even like know off the top of my head like how many we're growing at any given time, but I can like name them off. A lot of oyster mushrooms. So we have a golden oyster mushroom, a blue oyster, one we call black pearl, which is like kind of an interesting trumpet oyster hybrid. And then we have a Italian oyster, which is like brown and really like low water content. It's really nice. We're trialing king oysters, and then we also grow piapino mushroom, which is Italian for little poplar mushroom, chestnut, and chestnut mushroom, and what else do we got? Lion's mane, coral tooth, which is another type of hericium mushroom. Lion's mane, hericium, they call them tooth fungus because they don't have like a cap with gills. They just have a bunch of tiny little, I guess they're like little tendrils, and the spores come out of the tip. They're like it's like thousands of little spore guns.
Yeah.
That's how the tooth fungi work. And then other than that, we're messing with enoki mushroom right now, and then the big the white whale of of the mushroom growing world is probably maitake, hen of the woods mushroom. And we used to grow it, and it really kicked our butts. It's very difficult. So we're building a dedicated room just for that mushroom. It's quite the diva. Yeah.
Very cool. Very interesting. Yeah. I was thinking when you were explaining the tooth fungus mushrooms, because I've seen lion's mane and coral tooths, and they do look very different. Like whenever I see lion's mane, it looks like a creature, like a guinea pig or something that you could just pet. It's very furry. So that's really interesting to hear about like why. And I wanted to ask also about, I guess, the growth of your business. You said you've been doing this for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So how has it, I guess, grown since you started? And have you seen a recent uptick in popularity at all with your mushrooms?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the pandemic was a really interesting turning point for mushrooms. I feel like they were definitely getting hype before, but when the pandemic happened, so many people really started thinking hard about like the way that they ate. It was like a very like introspective, reflective moment, and like maybe high anxiety moment for a lot of people in the US, and people really reconsidered like, how they ate and took care of their bodies, and especially like supported their immune systems, because like you got a pandemic, so everyone's like, what can I do to protect my family and protect myself? So I think mushrooms were already like kind of in the wings, getting a lot of attention for their medicinal benefits and for their overall like health benefits. And then when the pandemic happened, a lot of people started buying grow kits and getting interested in growing them and eating them, especially. Vegetarianism and veganism, I think, is another big thing that's culturally like gotten like way more mainstream, and a lot of vegans and vegetarians are really looking for things that they can satisfy the cravings or like for like the texture of meat. So a mushroom like lion's mane is like super popular with vegans. Yeah, so a lot of that kind of all happened, and like I was saying too before we started recording, that I think the other interesting thing about it, like a more of a big picture view of it, is that the U.S., like we're kind of culturally off on our own, like in an interesting way. You look at like the American food is very distinct from European food or different types of Asian cuisine. But we're obviously like highly influenced by them, and more you see lots of new restaurants that are focusing on authentic Japanese or sushi or Thai food, those kinds of things. So as that's happened, I think all these more exotic ingredients that people aren't familiar with people have like kind of been more willing to try things that they wouldn't try before.
Wow. Do you have any favorite mushrooms to eat? I know that's probably a difficult question because you, of all people, would know a lot.
You mean like wild mushrooms, or like any mushroom, or just the ones that I grow?
Both, I guess.
Okay. I really like the maitake a lot. I like shiitakes a lot. I like piopinos. I'm not that picky. I like eating mixes of mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that a lot. I picked fresh morels for the first time a few weeks ago, and that's pretty hard to beat.
Oh, interesting, yeah. I know some of them are like a little meatier, like earthier than others. Like I know, I've had shiitakes and enoki I really like. The ones that are kind of texturally interesting, I guess.
Yeah.
But also have a bit like of a nuttiness. Like I like chestnuts as well.
Yeah.
But then there's also, I feel like whenever I've had like a lion's mane, I feel like it's similar to chicken almost.
Yeah.
Like it's a little milder, a little bit like lemony.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just so interesting that there's such a diversity of flavors and textures.
Yeah. I really love eating at the restaurants that we sell mushrooms to, and tasting the way that they prepare them, and the things that they do. And they all have their own little touch.
Yeah. Very cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of, the Unbothered edition from WFSU Public Media. New episodes drop each Thursday, and they're available wherever you get your podcasts. Speaking of is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation.